Beyond Agile. The things they're doing at Fraedom are amazing. They've introduced Kaizen coaches, their system thinking, but I'm going to let him fill you in on all that. So welcome, Gareth.
Thank you. Previously on Agile Auckland Fraedom, who was here exactly a year ago when I talked about Fraedom? So this is going to continue on from that story a little bit. If you remember, let's just go on here about restrooms. At the time, an interesting thing happened, so I checked in the feedback afterwards, and a lot of people said you were talking about the practice model too, but most of it was about neuropsychology, thixotropic materials, not saying they, all of these different things, and you were sort of right, and the story is this. The week before, I'd already committed to that talk. We knew that we had changed it, we had a strategic SDLC review, which was I was leading. But Simon, our founder and CIO, got me in an office and said, hey Gareth, we are going to change this practice model a little bit more radically than you thought. And here's some stuff, but you cannot tell anybody. And I don't have an off switch, I'm really bad, and especially, I think it's because I'm authentic, but as soon as I get going, I don't stop. And so immediately I had to really carve it out. So today I want to talk a bit more about how we've emerged with our practice model over the last year. Also last year I'd only been at Fraedom for 3 months. So a lot of what I was talking about was a snapshot of what I saw, and the emphasis is on what I intended to do in the future. And at the time I committed to come back in a year and say that what we've done. So I'd also like to talk about my journey in the last 12 months, and particularly what I saw initially and what then happened at the end of the year, which led us on to the 3 things we're going to talk about today. Beyond Agile, tactical delivery, and Kaizen coaches. Those are the 3 things we're going to talk about. Before we go any further, Beyond Agile, hashtag. It's a little bit of irony there. We still embrace Agile. We still believe in the 12 principles and the 4 values, and we are still Scrum teams. So the Kaizen coaches are still acting as a role of Scrum Master. So we're not doing away with Agile. And the irony is there are lots of hashtags, no estimates, no planning, no projects, no everything. But I think we should embrace what we've done and then take the journey forward. So if we're going to fail, we should fail forward. A little about Fraedom. So for those of you who don't know who Fraedom are, we're now 20 years old. We still have our CIO, Simon, who's the founder, and Ross is the CTO. They started as 3 guys, parts of Deloitte. They had this great idea of an expense management card. And that's exactly what we do. So you probably are aware of the Fraedom products. If you've got a business or corporate card with somebody like BNZ, it's Fraedom behind it. So it's a white label Fraedom product. Fraedom.com goes directly to some of the organizations, so they use their business expensing. And we have accounts managers who then reconcile it in the back end. It's grown really quickly. So it started out with those 3 guys back in 1999. Back in 2011, Fraedom, or SpendVision as it was called then, decided to adopt Scrum. So I think there were 3 Scrum teams at the time. Nick and Priyanka were there at the time, and I think it was about 3. Then, a few years later, 2015, Fraedom adopted the practice model. I think it was 8 teams just then, and they were just getting to that precipice of about 150 people. So you'll be aware of the Dunbar number of how organisations, after they get beyond that, the organisation has to slightly change. The practice model, you'll be familiar with Squads and Tribes, Spotify language. We don't use that Spotify language, although we're very similar to Spotify in that we're predominantly a technology company, with all of the other ancillary services only taking less than 10% of the number of people we've got. So that was 2015, and that's when I first learned about Fraedom. I joined back in February last year, 7th of February, I remember it well. It was my first full-time job in 10 years, and I'm still there now. But most significantly, 2 days later, I think because I joined, but maybe not, Visa acquired Fraedom. You don't believe it, right? So now we're owned by Visa, and we have been for 18 months. And at the time, that was a sizable change. For me, it was a brand new company, and all of a sudden we're owned by this big American corporate multinational. What did it mean for us? Anyway, going back to Fraedom, those are the numbers. We have to change these every few weeks because they They increased quite a lot. So we're 20 years old, 1 million transactions a day, 7 million employees we service. And if you're aware of, say, Flexi Purchase, that's a Fraedom product in the background. And these are some of the big partners we work with. So these are the big banks. And Fraedom was talking at the product tank last night about how initially it was product-led or maybe sales-led. And we were being driven by the demand from our partners, who then have the end users. But now we're starting to become product-led. So we have UX teams and we're looking at developing our own products that we then present to the market with our own user research. So that's a quick snapshot of Fraedom. So why Beyond Agile? Before I go any further, I am passionate about this industry. I'm passionate about how we work. It's important to me that all of us in this room, we can influence how we lift the game of the New Zealand economy. That's my purpose statement. That's why I get out of bed every day. I've also spent my entire career kind of doing this. So initially I was in the Royal Navy, which says, hold on a minute, there's not Agile. But strangely, military leadership is. It's called Mission Command. Then after I've been in the Navy for 5 years, I did a postgrad in management theory. This was 94. And I studied Japanese management principles. And I was already obsessed with lean principles. I'd studied Toyota. And so for me, my entire career has been informed by that. Wind forward to 2001. Can anyone remember what they were doing on the day the Agile Manifesto was signed? Where we were working? I know, because I checked. I was working at Navma, running a Kanban line and a production line. I was a production engineer. And for me, Kanban, as applied in manufacturing, is bread and butter. I continued to be a project manager. I was really proud at Navma because I set up their stage gate process. Big waterfall, big stages where you say, don't ask, don't tell. And you know that you've sort of done a bit of the design before the requirements phase. And I felt a bit of a fraud, and I knew that these Gantt charts I was doing, it was how I was being paid, but it wasn't sitting with how I'd learned 15 years before how to lead companies. 7, 8 years ago, I'd moved into the software industry. And since then, I've been an Agile coach, a Scrum Master, worked with many of the consultancies. And by the way, I'm honoured and flattered that there's so many people here today that know me. So even though you know me, you've come along. So. Right, so that's my background. And the reason I say that, firstly, I have to say this for Visa. These are my personal opinions and don't reflect the opinions of Visa Incorporated. Boom. Also, it's my genuine opinion, and it's very opinion-driven. It's based on what I think I know, but some of it may be slightly confronting with some of the things I've seen in the industry. Please challenge me if you disagree, but it's my genuine opinion, so that's what I'd like to share with you today. Agile. We know that Agile is the umbrella. It's the umbrella term to cover all of these practices, methodologies, and all these things here. Somebody, help me out. What's wrong with this picture for me? Somebody who works with me, you know it's a trigger word in there. Yeah? Methodology. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. By the way, if you're going to apply for, we've got a Kaizen Coach role open. If you apply for Kaizen Coach, just do a search and replace on your CV. It really triggers me. Because Agile is not about what you do. It's about the way you think. It's those core values. It's about having that experimental mindset. But this umbrella, this is something that has resonated. You've all seen this before. It's a common way of expressing what Agile means as an umbrella of all of these practices. But look a bit deeper. So we've got Scrum and Lean and Crystal. Hold on a minute. Lean, is that a practice? I thought Lean was a set of principles that predate Agile. Now, you can challenge me. I'm genuinely asking now, and Dave, is there like a Lean, we'll do Lean with this team? Does that exist? I don't know, but I see this and people just bung it in there because there's lots of buzzwords. And so, I mean, I grabbed this off Google. I was looking for an image for the umbrella. But the thing is that this is proliferating. So you'll have some consultancy in Reykjavik who'll have the star model, and then that will be the next thing. And I truly believe that we have to try and make sense of the way we work. And every model that you've got will make sense for you, but it's not something that you can impose upon other people. So while we're creating the Fraedom model, and I would like to inspire you how Fraedom works, you wouldn't necessarily do exactly what we do. And we know that the Spotify, the team at Spotify say, you're doing the Spotify model, which one? There's about 19. Spotify New York is different to Stockholm. So we don't want to follow rote. And so I personally have an issue with this. And because of the proliferation, I think that's the kind of umbrella we've got today. So let's go back to my journey at Fraedom. So June last year, Simon, our CIO, said, Gareth, we're going to look at the way, we're going to reorganise the way we're growing because we've got to 18 scrum teams. We're hiring more. We hired another 100 in the last 12 months. But 18 teams are starting to struggle because there's too many. We've broken into value streams, or tribes, as you call them. And those value streams, now one, banking and expense, is 11 teams, which is more than the whole of Fraedom 5 years ago. We're too large and we're too flat. So you may remember from last year I spoke of that Julia Wolf paper. And she said that a lot of organisations, when they delayer with the intent of empowering the people, bringing the information, the authority to where the information is, what actually happens is people don't feel the courage or the awareness to be able to make those decisions. So in essence, all of the decisions concentrate to fewer people. So there's a term called relayering, and that's the first thing that we did. So now we have 25 teams. We have those value streams, but we've relayered to have stream leadership, and that's just emerging now. So each value stream has a core of people who lead the value stream. Similar to Spotify as well, so you'll have maybe in one stream we've got a Kaizen coach, a Scrum Master, we've got a few senior developers and a product owner. But there's always somebody who's accountable, and accountability is the key word here. One person who's accountable for the tactical delivery of that value stream. We then also relayered head group, so we have a head of delivery and then a head of platform. Craig is here tonight. Hello, Craig. He's our new head of delivery. Now, the interesting thing is I'm a practice lead, so I was at the time an agile practice lead. So think of a matrix. You think of a pyramid, right? So the practice go across the horizontal, and then initially you imagine that the head of delivery is the vertical. But the way I'm thinking is slightly different. I see Craig and I in the same orbit around the same people, but we have slightly different focuses. So I'm focusing on the Kaizen coaches and the Scrum Masters and the product owners in their practice, whereas Craig is focusing on the product. And frankly, I don't even know what the product is, to be honest, but I'm not saying you don't know the practice. But what we do is we have a very clear distinction, and my focus is to optimize the way we work across the organization. So now there's 15 Scrum Masters, there's 15 product owners, which leads me on to this, Scrum Masters. So let's go back to my analysis of the industry. There's different types of leadership. You may be familiar with the Goldman leadership model from 2000, where we have coaching, democratic, affiliative, pace-setter leaders, the visionaries. Then we have the authoritative, and finally the coercive. And we all have a bit of each, and depending on the context, you may hop in around those different leadership stances. But if you look at an organisation and the culture of an organisation, I see these 4 different domains. The top left, and this is really democratic leadership, and it's the hippie culture. It's we want psychological safety. We want everybody to be happy. We're going to give people beanbags and free soda and let the team decide. We teamify, it's up to the team, let them work it out. We don't upset people and we focus on that. So I've got a hippie there. Now, I don't think anyone is a true hippie, but this is, and there's merit in an element of that. But if you're entirely like that, without accountability, you may have psychological safety, but you won't have delivery. And to be psychologically safe, you also need the courage to challenge one another. Psych safety doesn't mean absence of conflict. It means more. It means to be able to challenge one another. So we don't want to be hippies. Then the wiggles. Again, gamification has its place. As an agile coach, I've used techniques. I've used the Lego playing game. We want to have a laugh. We know anthropologically that laughter creates bonding. It creates that oxytocin. But I have to say, I've seen some organisations who focus too much on this. It's all about the scrounge hunts, and the games and the Office Olympics and have a laugh and beanbags and water pistols. and we forget about coming to work and doing a job, making a difference. Top bottom left, the bean counter. The bean counter, now I tread carefully here. Fraedom's different to the large organisations. There's many large organisations here in Auckland now, and in Oz, the big telcos, the big banks, and they're driven by the big four. You know, McKinsey, KPMG, PwC. And I have to say, and this is what I pitched to the CIO when we had this change to tactical delivery, that Agile is now being used, in my opinion, as a Trojan horse for cost cutting. Agile is not about cutting cost. Ultimately, you will save money because we maximise the work we don't do, we reduce our defects, we get to the market sooner, so we reduce our cost of delay. But it's not about cost cutting. And I think there is a drive of the cost accounting mindset, in my opinion. Now, I haven't been in the big organisations for a few years, I may be wrong. I am open to being challenged. I'll just put it out there. Finally, this guy on the left. Does anyone know who this guy is here? Anyone know this guy? Anyone watched Full Metal Jacket? Yeah, Lee Emery. Didn't he do a brilliant piece? And he was only in the first half. He was Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. Servant leadership, right? We all say we're servant leaders. Is he a servant leader? No. What's Latin for to serve? Sergeant. Military leadership, strangely, is servant leadership. I was in the Navy, and I was going to become a senior rate, a chief engineer. And one of the main things when I first became a leading hand was it was all about looking after the men in the mess. It was only men at the time. Sergeant means to serve. Now, you think people barking orders at you, and I joined the Navy a year after this movie came out, and they were all trying to emulate him. It's a game. Now, that was the 1960s. This was set in the Vietnam War. But genuinely, if you look at military leadership, it is true servant leadership. People don't actually shout like that in the military. Maybe they do basic training, but that's to break down the behaviours, to reset the team, and gets the team to be connected together. So if you've read Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek, he talks about the US Marines and how they go on the assault course. It's not about being the fittest and the fastest. It's about how the team help one another. The first guy becomes ostracised. And I have to admit, I've learned all the bad lessons in leadership. I was that guy. I became a class leader, I was senior apprentice, all that kind of stuff, and I became very, very unpopular. But it's not about the person who's the fastest, it's about getting the whole team together. It's about getting that slowest person, Private Pyle, if you remember, and bringing them along. And that's why the military works the way they do. And we literally put our lives in one another's hands. We are like brothers. But people think of the military and they say command and control. People watch David Marquet and we hear of leader, or as he now calls it, intent-based leadership. But what David Marquet is tapping into is what Napoleon did 200 years ago. Strangely, the Americans after the Vietnam War thought, we lost, we've got to change the way we work, let's look to industry to see what industry are doing, and they focused on efficiency, not adaptability. And then Marquet had this light bulb in 2009, and in 2003, Stanley McChrystal, he wrote the book Team of Teams, identified that the US military was the most efficient organisation on the planet. Yet Al-Qaeda, with post-it notes and word of mouth, were able to get around them. And they were losing really badly after the post-invasion. And it isn't about efficiency, it's about adaptability. So one thing that I bring to Fraedom is that military mindset. Really strange, isn't it? Now go back to that Goldman model. You've got all of those on that sliding scale from coercive all the way through to democratic. My sense is many Agile coaches do really well in the affiliative. We care, we genuinely care about our teams. It's hard, therefore, to be coercive. Similarly, I personally consider myself a pace as a leader, so you describe that as come with me, and it's great you can bring high motivated people along with you, but you have to be very, very self-conscious that you don't burn people out, and you bring people along with you. So I need to consciously learn strategies to be affiliative and democratic. What do you think I did with my team of Scrum Masters to help them become more coercive? I'll give you a clue. When I suggested it to Simon, my CEO, he winced.
Assault course.
Not quite. Almost, very almost. Now, because because I was a bit confronting when I went there, because I put myself out there, and we're having to manage my reputation a little bit. And what I did, and it was a surprise to them, all 10 Scrum Masters at the time, we went into the car park, and squad, quick march, left, right, about turn, all of them, and we videoed it. I would have preferred to do it in the park outside the building, and then go on Slack and say, hey, what's Gareth up to? And let everyone see. Because that is legitimate. There's times when it's legitimate to issue commands. There's a fire, get out. You don't say, there's a fire, let's not know if we should get out or not. It's legitimate. Very few times, but we need that tool in our toolbox. And it's something I learned, there's times when it's appropriate, and there's also times when it's inappropriate. And I've learned the hard way when it's inappropriate. So, I'm not saying one or another is wrong, but I'm saying that don't discount there's going to be Sergeant Hartman. I think that is important. Yes, we should have fun, but moderate it. Yes, we care. We should be human-centered, we should be human-centric, and genuinely care about the people in our care. And yeah, we need to worry about the money. We need to worry about process. We need to ensure that there's consistency, but within reason. So that's my analysis of Agile. And I think even when I came to Fraedom, I'll be honest, we in the Agile practice didn't have a great reputation within Fraedom. And also there was a bit of conflict between the Scrum Masters and the product owners. That happens in every organisation. As human beings, as we grow, when we get past the Dunbar number, after 150 people, we tend to tribalize. And there's us and them. And if you remember from David Marquet, we had a no-they day. It was a few weeks after I did the last talk. And we had a whole day when every time you said they, you had to make a note. And the team who had the most days had to wear funny hats and day of the day and horrible sweets and all that kind of stuff. Bit of a laugh, but it meant people became self-aware of thinking of you and them. But we had a real issue between the product owner and the Scrum Master. And for the development team, that was an issue because who's my leader? The Scrum Master's asking me to come to this retrospective, but the product owner says, no, we don't need to bother with that. Or vice versa. So it was important to me that we had pair leadership. So, tactical delivery. This is where the tactical delivery practice emerged. Let's go to December last year. I got Simon in a room. I'd been talking to my HR advisor for a while about the org structure and about how we could change it. And there's a few things I said. So I gave him the spiel that I've just given you about the Gunnery Sergeant Harmon. And luckily, he and Russ had both been in the cadets, so they sort of got it. I also said about the agile approach in the industry and how it's becoming cost-centric. And I just read in Spark about, in the Herald about Spark. And you know when it's in mainstream media, there's a chance that they may be building it up to crash it down. And then you hear that ANZ, I'm naming names, right? But they said in Australia, we're going to be 100% agile by next year. Show me the data. Well, I don't even know what that means. So I'm really concerned about the way our industry is going. So that's why we want to go beyond agile and do our thing, but embracing what we think works for us. So what we call this new practice is going to be a practice that includes both product owners and the Scrum Masters. So now I lead a practice of 30, which is a bit of a stretch. But it means that now I can work on both sides, support and coach both people, and how then both the PO and Kaizen coach present to the team. And it means a team feels safe. It means getting a coherent message on any tactical decision. Also, there's a huge weight on that word, tactical. Another buzzword for you, if you've got a handy CV in, strategic. I've noticed in the industry, because I've been coaching Scrum Masters and Agile coaches for some time, that in some cases, relatively junior Scrum Master has been with a team for 4 months, loves the work, and before long they say, yeah, but I want to grow my career, I want to become an Agile coach, so that they can coach the Scrum Masters. And then a couple of months later, I want to be an enterprise Agile coach, and I call it the umbrella hats. I want to be strategic, and even when I was a consultant, I found that many other consultants were taking a beeline to the C-suite and leaving the teams to it. And I think the most competent people to serve the teams, the coaches, are the most proficient. and we should spend more time with the teams. And this talks to why we changed to Kaizen Coach as well, which we'll get on into in a minute. So tactical for me is a really loaded word. The US Army, they have a phrase which is, well, it was like tactics eat strategy for breakfast, but I think I've actually been corrected. It's logistics eat strategy for breakfast. And your strategy should be your next 100 tactical moves. So although you need to know what the long-term horizon is, what we're doing at a team level ought to focus most of our efforts on what we're doing now. What we're going to deliver value for now, how can we recoup our costs now? So tactical delivery for me was a great idea. It came from Simon, and it worked, and I quickly Googled a picture. I should have thrown it up for you, but if you Google tactical delivery on images, there's a picture of a load of US Coast Guard guys with all the, going to raid some drug smuggler. So that's the kind of thing that makes me get up in the morning. Yeah, now the other thing, so 2001, we have the Agile Manifesto, but we know that that was brought out by a problem with the tech sector after the dot-com bust. And a lot of what they did was based on Scrum, XP, all of those 17 who signed it were very much have been in the industry for a long time, especially Schwaber and Sutherland. And they focused on how we can work better. And Scrum is very much on the new product development way and looking at how Japanese companies worked compared to their American counterparts. This book here, so I went to the Business Agility Conference in Australia, and I spoke about the Fraedom Practice Model too, so if you're interested, it's on YouTube, and really delves into what we are now at Fraedom in our model. But another guy spoke called Nigel Dalton. I'm not sure if you're aware of this guy. He's at Real Estate Australia. He was referred to as a grandfather of Agile in Australia. He's a real thought leader. And he shares the same concerns as I, and this is where it really struck a light bulb for me. This was in September last year. One of the first things he said is, we should reclaim the use of the word manager, because managers who are bosses who are poor leaders has given management a bad name, such that there are no managers here. We even say it's a freedom. So I thought, yeah, that's right. We shouldn't shy away from management. We have a business, we need to manage it. But secondly, he referred to this book, The Fifth Discipline, 1990. This version is 2006. And so I got to read it a few months ago, and light bulbs went off everywhere. Who has read The Fifth Discipline here? I'm only going to give you one book recommendation today. I warmly recommend you look at it. And in particular, the first chapter talks about something called the bullwhip effect. And it's a small change on the demand, how it can then amplify to be an enormous change on the supply. And they talk about what's known as the beer game, and a supply and demand curve change, and you find that a small uptick in demand of beer causes everybody to overreact if they only know their part of the system. And then what happens is the brewery goes into overdrive, and then 20 weeks later, the whole channel is filled, and everyone's overloaded, and warehouses are full, and the brewery goes bankrupt because we don't need beer for a year. And it's strange because I read that just at the same time we had a problem with the flow of information from the partner to the product manager to the product owner to the BA to the team. It's the same thing. It's a supply chain, and we need an integrated supply chain. So, the fifth discipline, systems thinking. And Agile, I'm quoting Nigel Dalton now, Agile has forgotten that our roots is in systems thinking and learning organisations. This book was also referenced by the new book by Barry O'Reilly, Unlearn. So I started listening to Barry O'Reilly's book, and he said, fifth discipline, and I thought, oh yeah, I need to listen to that. So I listened to this first. This for me, and those of you who know me know I read a lot of books, or listen to a lot of books. This is the most significant book I've read in the last year, by a country mile. So there you go, recommended it. So let's talk about Kaizen coaches. How are we doing for time, by the way? 25 minutes. Good. Kaizen coach, why change something that's not broken? We had Scrum Masters. We're one of the few organisations in Auckland who have dedicated Scrum Masters to teams. There are some. Does anyone here works in an organisation who has dedicated Scrum Masters? Yeah, you're Fraedom, mate. Which organisation do you work at?
We have Scrum.
Well, of course, yes. There's not many. And I believe it's a profession. Yeah, sorry, which one? Genesis, of course, yeah, Genesis. Yeah, you guys came over to visit us, and I'm going over to visit you soon, aren't I? In a couple of weeks, yeah. There's not many of us. And here you go. This is not me venting and whinging, I promise you. We've grown, and so we've had a lot of people come in. And one of the things is we've had a lot of developers say, yeah, I'm a developer, I'm a senior developer, and also I'm a certified Scrum Master. I'm an engineer. Technically, I can code, but I can guarantee you do not want me anywhere near the production code. I think being a Scrum Master is a full-time profession. Now, I know it's hard to sell the money because they're not cheap and there's not many of us. And many organisations need to recognise the value. But one thing I'm so proud of at Fraedom, and the reason I gave up consulting to go back to full-time, is because this was an opportunity to grow a team of 10 Scrum Masters. And I'm really proud of that. And yeah, Nick, I want to thank you for that because I know you were instrumental in that. Here's the thing though, Scrum Master, we were advertising for Scrum Masters and there was loads of Agile coaches saying, I'm not a Scrum Master. And then I know certain telco companies who may have had a DBA a year ago who suddenly goes, ta-da, you're an Agile coach. So not only do we have that hierarchy from Scrum Master, Agile Coach, Enterprise Agile Coach, we now have people self-labeling themselves as Agile Coach. When I first joined, this was one of the first things on my to-do list. The team came to me and said, look, we're called Scrum Masters, and in the industry that's seen as relatively junior, incorrectly. So can we have a new name? Can we be Agile Coaches? And I straight away thought, well, no, I don't want to get on that bandwagon. Because Agile Coaches can tend to think, well, I'm there just to coach the organisation, let the team work it out for themselves. And we focus, all of our Scrum Masters focus on the team first. And we spent a long time worrying about this. We thought of different, lean lead, technology lead, team coach, senior team coach, and none of them seemed to work. And then this name came up, and Kaizen. And you all know, obviously, you're familiar with the idea of Kaizen. It comes from Toyota. Actually, it doesn't come from Toyota. Toyota, they interpreted what they saw from Deming from the Americans, from training within industry. So in the Second World War, they couldn't have big transformations. They had to incrementally and iteratively change the car plant to make aircraft and tanks. So training within industry is the first example of Kaizen. And when Deming went to Japan in 45, 46, they said, change good for change, whatever it is. And that's what Kaizen is. So, and Toyota really embraced Kaizen. And then we then took it on again. So Motorola pioneered Lean Six Sigma, and Kaizen was part of it. So if you Google Kaizen Coach, it was a thing about 20 years ago in Motorola. But they would have Kaizen meetings, once a week. So 52 times a year, we're going to change. But that's not true Kaizen, is it? Kaizen is 2,000 times a shift. Kaizen is the way I think it. Well, many of you know I'm a triathlete. When I'm racing and I'm swimming, I may be halfway through a 3K swim. And that stroke I did, I just dropped my elbow. Next stroke, I'm going to lift the elbow. How's my breathing? How's my pace? On the cycle, I'm going to push my power up or down. Constantly adjusting and changing. That's true Kaizen. And if you think of Toyota and the Andon Code, that's exactly what we want at Fraedom. Stop what we're doing, have a look at the quality, how can we incrementally improve it next time? And I was inspired by another book this year, The Atomic Habits. Brilliant book, I haven't put it on here. And James Clear talked about the British cycling team, who used to be the butt of all jokes, but now completely smash the field in everything they do. And the way they did it was all of those compounding 1% improvements. And that's exactly what we're looking at doing at Fraedom. We're not doing a transformation per se, because that scares people. But iteratively and incrementally, every day, what one little thing can we do? So for me, Kaizen Coach was exactly the essence of what we wanted to do. But of course, this comms I'm giving to you, I haven't really done a good job of doing it internally yet. I need to sort of show them this. But people are saying, well, Kaizen Coach, isn't that still the same as Scrum Master? Well, kind of. We still got two teams. We still run sprint reviews. We do all of the things a Scrum Master does. But we just want to step slightly away from this melee that's happening in the industry and do our own thing and call it our own thing as well. And for me, Kaizen is the key to what we're trying to do. So that's why we call them Kaizen Coaches. Finally, something that I'm particularly interested in, and you can tell today that there's a thread throughout all of this of psychology, leadership, how we engage with people. And one of our strategic keys for this year was leadership. So I am a leader at Fraedom, there's many leaders. And we're doing quite a few things. And I've been invited by our head of people and ops, or people experience, based in Melbourne. I'm the, for want of a better word, the thought leader here at Fraedom. So I'm the sponsor and leading a leadership initiative, and that's going to create a lot of different things. Live it, leadership, so I've got to be careful exactly what I say. There's a nice surprise coming in from some of our leaders here. We're going to have a big offsite with MCs and bands and music and keynote speakers. We're going to get together and we're going to have a conscious effort to improve the way we lead. That's for most of the leaders within the organisation. And Fraedom's going to be investing on developing us as leaders. And I see that as my role, because there's a testing practice lead, there's a practice lead of developers and architects. And sure, their craft is those hard skills. Well, for my practice, the hard skills in my practice is what everyone else would call soft skills, which I would call leadership. So there's that. There's going to be some development. We had a load of trainers coming from Visa last week, and we're learning about crucial conversations, 7 habits, all of the Stephen Covey work. And we are looking at our soft skills, which I read somewhere is not a good phrase. And then there's this thing, Live at Leadership. It's the aspiring leaders. And this week we are announcing 8 people at Fraedom. So there's been, this week, 30 people who applied for it. So internally we sent out an application. Come on this program. We're going to give you not only a 2-day training course from an external vendor, but you'll have a monthly mentoring session to follow up on the training. You'll have internal mentoring and coaching from me. You'll have a project, you'll have a budget, and we're going to do some really cool stuff, some stuff for the community, some HR stuff. And at the end of it, you're then going to present to our CEO, Kyle. So all of these things, we had 30 people apply. I and Bev leads our global customer operations. We sat through 30 interviews in the last 2 days. And it was like, I was acting like Simon Cowell. It was like very, very quick 20-minute things. And on Friday, we've already decided who those are, and we're announcing these 8 people. And it's going to be something we do every year. They tried it last year with 2 people in Melbourne, and it had a real big impact. But for me, this is the important thing. Agile, great, lean, systems thinking, awesome. But we are working with people, and we are all leaders. You are all leaders in what you do. And my emphasis and my main focus for this year is going to be product ownership, because I'm now leading the product owners. Continuing with the learning curve we've got with our Kaizen coaches, who I'm very proud of now. But this thing here, leadership. That's me. That's Gareth Holebrook. I'm on YouTube. I do lots of stuff on there. There's my LinkedIn, there's my Twitter, there's my Tinder. No, it's not there. I'm married. That's my email address. I really hope that inspired you, gave you some ideas. I'm more than happy to have follow-up conversations with you. For me, it's still a continued journey. We're not there yet, and we've got a long way to go. I hope you